This is Outriders. We're on Xbox Series X, diving into this latest take on the whole games as services style, but with a cooperative edge to it in a very twisted, dark, and generally messed up world. I like to consider it being basically Gears of War meets Destiny, and perhaps even a little bit better than Destiny in my opinion. I could argue that in some of the areas of the game. And with that, on Series X, we're getting a 4K resolution, which is apparently somewhat dynamic, but very close to the native ranking of 4K at 60 FPS with HDR support. And yeah, the game does look absolutely wonderful. It is gorgeous, it plays very fluidly from my experience with it, and it's a lot of fun. Now, the game has had some server issues off the bat, but most of these online games tend to do so, especially with this one being mobbed by its debut with Game Pass. So I'm going to give it a bit of a break in regards to the connection things, because I only experienced it for like, I think 40 minutes the one day I couldn't play. But other than that, the whole campaign I played basically flawlessly through, and then jumped into the online multiplayer kind of extras, and that's what you're going to be seeing here today. So none of this should be spoilerish to any degree, because these are the expeditions. So this is endgame content that I'm showing off here, and we're going to be talking about that a little bit later on. So Outriders was quite a surprise to me, because it wasn't necessarily something that I was anticipating or really expecting. But when I jumped into it, I was pleasantly surprised by the style of the world, the combat, the looting system, the characters, and the story at play here. It was actually quite a great time. I think this is a very well done looter type shooter game, and I had a really enjoyable time playing through it, you know, partially alone and sometimes with other people. It's a lot more fun, and it's definitely focused on co-op play. So with that, the game definitely, you know, can have 3 players together fighting. You can play by yourself, but there's going to be some points where you feel very overwhelmed. Now, you also got to watch. The game likes to creep up the difficulty if you're not paying attention. There's different world tiers, and that's also part of what feeds into the fact that this game has tons of replayability. If you're somebody that wants to loot, you want more of a challenge, this game is loaded with difficulty and challenge for you to work through. So first off, different tiers. So you can be like normal. I was getting up to extreme, and I was having a very hard time with extreme, and then I was like, you know what, we're just going to go back to normal. And you can work and you can get there, and if you've got teammates, I think you could handle it better. And like I said, there's a few parts where single player on normal, I felt a little overwhelmed with, kind of to the point where I was like, this is seemingly more designed for a cooperative experience. So keep that in mind, but you can play through it fine. I did, and I had a great time playing most of it by myself, but also having, again, like I mentioned prior, some good moments having another player or two hop in and play with me. So the story itself is really interesting. Earth isn't looking too good. You're going off to this new planet, but you get there, and while it's seemingly good, that's not the case. And I think this is a good kind of thing that I have to talk about in order to really set the stakes for this kind of game. And so, you know, partial spoilers first hour. So there's a big shift from this game being about exploration and discovery and the hope of humanity to being, oh my god, we're in a huge weird war and everything is twisted, people are dying, there's trenches, it's combat, it's crazy. And I don't think this is too spoilerish. Like, the game is messed up. Like, it's seriously grim and dark, and you're just trying to deal with it and also figure out what exactly is going on, because it's nuts looking. Like you can see out here, this is kind of a good chunk of the game is just really grim looking places. Now with that, it actually is quite a beautiful game. Visually, it's very impressive. It feels very next gen, which is nice, because we haven't had too many of those really pushing the boundaries kind of games, and I think this is one of the first ones that really does kind of pop with particle effects, with visuals, with the style of the game, the scope of it. It's really quite interesting. Now with that, you do get multiple of really cool locations. And I'm saying, you know, a lot of the game is like this, but I mean in the sense of the structuring of the destruction and the sense of a lost, morbid, messed up world. You actually visit a variety of really lovely biomes. There's like a snow location, there's a jungle, there's desert, there's luscious lands, there's forests, there's like all kinds of different locations. I was shocked by the different places you can go. And there's boss battles that you can do, and there's lots of side quests, and the main mission itself is pretty long, depending, you know, difficulty-wise and everything like that. It'll vary how long it is for you, and how good you are as well. And, you know, it's got a great length to that main story. I think you can have a lot of fun playing through it and battling, especially if you have a group of friends that you can enjoy this with. I think it's really good in that regard. And yeah, I was just really pleased by the story of this game. I thought it was actually really interesting. It was one of those ones where I was like anxiously kind of awaiting, you know, what's going to happen, trying to figure out what happened. You know, it was one of those ones with the mysteries where I'm kind of like, ooh, I'm really intrigued by this. Where are they taking this? And that really kept me going the whole way through in regards to the story. I also like the characters that were at play. They had a neat, you know, roster of individuals, kind of misfits that you get. Kind of a banding of like a fellowship of different characters that kind of popped together, which was neat. I don't think it necessarily had like the strongest performances, as to say, in every moment, but it was fun. It was action packed. I really liked how your character just like does not give a damn, and that was a lot of fun. And you can customize your character in different ways. You're constantly collecting different loot, and we're going to be kind of switching over to that in a sec. I just wanted to, you know, do some wrap-up thoughts on the story. The story is really interesting. I loved how it was handled. I thought it was really unique. I thought it was lengthy, and then you can expand that with like just a pile of side quests that you can do, and different side little adventures, and different little world things. Anyways, so past that, the story actually goes further to a degree with the end game content. So we're going to be talking about end game before we talk about like weapons and everything like that. So in the end game, as you've been noticing, you're doing these expeditions. You're trying to find these pods, and that's you get some loot from it, you know, and there's a ton of these different pods. Like, there's a pile of different missions you can do, and I kind of compare them a little bit to strike missions from Destiny almost. So you kind of go in, you battle things, you do a bit of a boss, and these can take anywhere from like 15 minutes to half an hour to like an hour even, some of them I think, depending on how good your team is. And you get rewards based on how fast you can go through them. And then on top of that, like, these are varied, these like good gameplay chunks, and these feel unique from the story entirely. And like I said, there's a good selection of them, like a really, really good selection of them, where they feel varied and they don't feel repetitive. I was very pleased. And this is something you can play over and over and over again, trying to get loot, and you're not going to really feel too bored. And I say that because there's a great variety of enemies in this game, across different factions and different designs. You know, some of them are slightly, you know, reskinned to a degree, and they act a little bit differently, but, you know, there's great variation within this game that I absolutely loved, and just generally adored. I was like, wow, this is, you know, every area kind of feels fresh, and you're seeing that in these expeditions. And you can keep playing them, because you can increase the tier of difficulty, so you can keep going back and back and back and back through different tiers in order to, you know, get better loot, face off more against more challenges. So this endgame is actually one of the most refreshing and lengthy sort of endgames I've seen in this type of game for, you know, this genre of gaming, really, for quite a while, at least I think so. I was kind of pleased with the setup. I think a lot of people will like that aspect of it. I don't normally get locked into the endgame of these types of things as much because, you know, I usually review something and then I move on to the next game because, you know, I've only got so much time. Time is finite, right? But for those that really love endgames, and you get a lot of questions and comments about those in past reviews I've done for similar games, and I think you're very, very well handled here. I think you could, if you like the gameplay loop, you could spend a lot of time working through this. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the looting and the gear and everything like that. So it's a game where, you know, I call it a little bit of a looter shooter. And you're collecting loot, you're collecting resources, you got different abilities. So there's a few different classes. I was the pyromancer, whatever, and they all have different abilities. They all have different types of unleashing skills you can use. They all got different skill trees. So there is a variation there between the different classes. So you might want to mix up your squad a bit if you're playing with a group of friends. You know, everybody does a different role. Whatever the case is, I really like this character because you could, like, burn people and have them explode in a I don't even know, a cloud of like blood, fire, and stuff. It was crazy. And you can like burn spikes up through the ground, and you know, I've seen other things where it's like little vortexes and stuff. Like, there's all kinds of different abilities. So you're gonna have to play around with it and see what you like, and you can like swap out the skills for different skills, and you can everybody has like this tree that you can kind of work through where you get bonuses for like more damage, more health, you know, kind of typical RPG stuff. And then on top of that, we have like an accolade system for getting rewards, like decorative things. You can customize your vehicle, your flag thing, you know, stuff like that, which is pretty cool, right? And then on top of that, we have like a fairly robust system of gaining loot. I felt very rewarded in this game in regards to finding different tiers of loot and items that I could use. I was constantly getting new stuff, and you could swap through it, dismantle things, sell things. You could take it to your one guy at your camp, because you got this really nice camp that you can kind of stop every so often, every like half hour, so every other mission. No, well, at the end of every mission, basically, you would get like a camp area you can go to, and you can change your like look, and you can trade, and you can get backstory context on characters or more lore if you want to. But you can also go to this guy, and he can upgrade your stuff. The doctor. He can upgrade your weapon tiers, your rarity, your mods, improve your armor. Like, everything can be kind of improved upon if you find something you really like. And there's lots of different weapon types: snipers, shotguns, you can have dual pistols, all kinds of different weird quirky things, whatever you want. And you're constantly feeling as though you are being rewarded with new tiers of items and weapons and tools that you can constantly use throughout battle. And that felt really good, the fact that I've constantly, throughout the entire experience, felt as though I was getting something better for actually playing regularly. It wasn't like popping things out 24/7. It's usually like the bigger bosses. As you can see on the mini-map there, the skull characters, these ones are like little mini bosses you fight, and they usually drop loot rewards. And you're not seeing that because the expeditions are handled a little bit differently. You fight and then you get your loot. And some characters are, like enemies and stuff, are really spongy. We're going to talk about the characters, enemies and stuff in a little bit here, but like I was saying, you're constantly feeling as though you're getting new rewards and new things that you can do, and you're feeling a good level of challenge while you're doing so. And then you can take that stuff, level it up, improve it, and be more ready to combat and battle new enemies that are tougher in the future, which I think is fantastic. At one point I was playing and I was like, oh man, I have such a time with these enemies, and then I got this super like leveled up gun from killing one, and I was like, oh wow, and I was just obliterating people for a bit until the enemy levels caught up again. But it was really cool. And the guns shoot differently, there's different types of guns, so everybody can find something they like, I think, and then keep improving on it over time, and I think that's really nice. I think that works out quite well, and it kind of works for the feedback loop of actually getting reward for your loot. I hate in Destiny where I never feel like I'm getting rewarded in that game. Like, I never feel like I'm getting anything good in it, and you have to like redo stuff, and I don't like that loop. But here I felt like I was properly getting things based on what I was doing. And yes, it can feel really grindy. Like, a lot of these enemies, they're very spongy. They take a lot of bullets, and they take a lot of teamwork and a lot of combo skills and stuff. Like, I mean, look at the particle effects and stuff. This game is just visually quite stunning. It really is quite a visual treat. I really did love the look of it. I mean, I talked about that earlier, but seriously, like, just seeing the combat and stuff in a situation of me not like rolling or running or trying to move around and not get killed, it's gorgeous. It really is quite like full of depth and design, and colors just kind of pop as against these like weird desolate wastelands and stuff. It's great. But we're talking about enemies, so there's lots of different types of enemies, and every region has different types of enemies on top of that. So you've got different tiers. So you've got like heavy guys, machine guns, you got mortar guys, you got snipers, you got shotgunners, you got runners. The game is constantly throwing different things at you. Now, I had assumed it was going to be more of a cover shooter, but that is not the case. This is one where you constantly need to be moving around. You can use the cover to your advantage, but I really didn't find too many situations where I was actively using cover. And that's one more issue I have with this, is the overwhelming thing, which I mentioned earlier. Sometimes there's points that don't seem quite perfectly set up for the quantity of players to the enemies, to the point where you're not only feeling overwhelmed, but you're actually getting pushed back into your, like, where you came from, or your little spawn area, and it's just like, whoa, this is a little too much. And I also felt that it was a little punishing during boss fights, that you have to like basically redo the whole boss fight. Like, there'll be a point where you get through, like, say this boss has 3 chunks of health. You get through 33% of that, you get a cutscene, and then things change up. But if you die in the next round or the last round, you have to go all the way back to the beginning. So I think the checkpoint system in this could have been better. I definitely think it could have been handled a little bit better, a little bit more fair. Now, I wasn't dying a ton, but, keep up with the difficulty changes and stuff, because that might kind of cause you to die a lot, or maybe you want the challenge. I'm just, some of those aspects to me were kind of like really, kind of a little bit tiring, especially, well, I mean, I was doing a lot of this pretty late at night when I was like, I actually streamed the majority of my well, the entirety of the campaign while I was doing my, like, working on this review and stuff. I thought it'd be a fun kind of connection thing and get like feedback and stuff on it. But that aside, it's just kind of like, it feels a little grueling at times, and it's kind of like, oh, come on. I've done all this work. Like, there is the end boss, and I'm not going to talk about the end boss at all, but there's this shift that happens where it's like a clear shift where you have to do like a little bit of movement, and it's kind of like there should have been a checkpoint there. Or there's this one enemy where you have to enter somewhere and do some stuff, then fight it, and you have to go all the way back to the beginning of like outside the area and load back into it, which I thought was like, a weird situation to have to deal with. And I think in general, though, the AI actually moves quite well. They use the environments, they challenge you, they spread out, they kind of feel a little bit realistic in regards to, being people that are using cover or trying to pick off at you at different directions. I thought that was kind of cool. And you feel like a bit of a god character, which is nice. You actually feel tough, because you're supposed to be like this special, augmented sort of individual due to these powers. I can't quite remember, something gifted or other. They give you like a special term where it's, you're slightly better than everyone because you have weird, crazy abilities. And there's other individuals you'll come across that also have these special gifts and stuff that are just nuts to deal with, and those ones are kind of fun. Again, this is like a twisted world, but it's also kind of beautiful, and there's a neat sense of mystery to it. A good variation within the creatures. Watch out for the brooding mothers, I think they're called. Those things are just, terrifying to deal with. But they vary their attacks and how they challenge you and how they move through the world and how they kind of pin you down. And you get some aerial ones, and every area uses different creatures. I never was like, oh, I'm tired of fighting this same thing again. I was always like, oh no, this thing's back. Or then I'd be like, oh no, they're mixing it up with this thing, and you keep having to adjust your strategies. And I thought that was really cool and really fun the whole way through. But again, it's just actually like a really great game. I thought it was very well done. I was more than surprised by it, because I had like literally no expectations for this going into it. I was like, cool, it's a literature type thing like Destiny, but whatever, it doesn't matter. I'll play it and I'll move on and stuff. But I'm actually like really into this. I'm genuinely surprised by what they offered here, and I think this one has a lot of potential if it gets in front of the right people to actually kind of enjoy what it has to offer. Because I think it's got great loot systems, great character setups, really interesting abilities, fantastic array of different enemies. It's well polished, different setups and scenarios for you to battle through. It's got a fantastic end game. At least I think it's a pretty good end game. I don't know if people have different standards for that kind of thing. It's neat to play in co-op. You can play it alone if you want. It would have been neat for them to try some different, multiplayer type things. I thought that could have been neat, but I don't think it really necessarily needed that. It works on being a good cooperative game first, and I think it really hits the mark on that. And again, at the current point in time, which I'm assuming will be perfectly sorted out, the servers are just overloaded right now. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt on this, that it's going to be totally working fine in a couple days or so. At the time of recording, and I'm sure it's fine at that point of whenever you might be watching it after launch, and I wouldn't hold that against them, because I think in this situation they were genuinely surprised by the quantity of players coming from Game Pass, I would imagine, because I think that might have made this game a little bit bigger of a deal than it might have initially been, and I think that's a really cool thing, that Game Pass was possibly able to do for this one. So hopefully there's more to come. I hope they expand upon it, because I think this world is interesting. I think the story's neat. I think it's got some cool characters. I really like the distinction of it. Like, this looks really lovely, doesn't it? Like, just the jungle, the density, the brush, everything like that. It's so cool. And there's so many moments, and I don't know if people appreciate them. They might just run by, where you can kind of look out into the backdrop and you feel like you're on this alien planet. It's so neat. And there's other moments where it's like, oh, this feels kind of like home a little bit like Earth, which is cool. And it's just, they've really done a good job of melding this like sci-fi style to this fantasy sort of environment that we're exploring and discovering and enjoying. Because I really did think it was going to be like this, beacon of hope and stuff for finding things out in the universe. But no, this is a twisted, messed up world. When the tonal shift happens in the game, you're going to be like, what? This is nuts, and just be totally shocked the whole way through, which is, kind of fun. But I hope you enjoyed this look at Outriders, because I had a really good time with it. I think if you give it a whirl, you'll have fun with it as well, and I think this one is going to be one of those surprising titles of the year, because it actually has a lot of content, a lot of heart, and a lot of great design to it.